"She's nothing but a gold digger." Nathan smirked, his voice carrying across the courtroom. "Look at her. 3 dead-end jobs and now she wants half my company? She never contributed anything of value." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white as my husband of 8 years publicly humiliated me. His mother, Diane, nodded approvingly from the spectator seats, while his attorney shuffled papers with an air of smug confidence. Judge Howard peered over his glasses. "Mrs. Wilson, do you have a response to these allegations?" With trembling legs but a steady voice, I stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to submit these bank records and a letter from William Harrison, the owner of Heritage Trust Bank." Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The color drained from Nathan's face as his attorney accepted the documents with visible confusion. The courtroom fell silent as the judge reviewed the papers, his eyebrows rising incrementally with each page. "Before we proceed," Judge Howard said, looking directly at Nathan, "perhaps you'd like to reconsider your statement, Mr. Wilson. But before I tell you how this ends, let me tell you how it began. My name is Emily Parker, or rather, I was Emily Parker before I became Emily Wilson. At 27, I was a junior financial analyst at Blueridge Investments with a freshly minted business administration degree and a 5-year plan to reach management level. My boss had just put me on the Westbrook acquisition team, a career-making opportunity that had me practically floating through my apartment door the night of Jessica's dinner party. "You've got to meet this guy," Jessica had texted earlier. "Smart, ambitious, total dreamboat." I almost didn't go. The Westbrook files needed reviewing, and I was hoping to impress the senior partners with some innovative analysis. But Jessica was persistent, and after a week of 14-hour workdays, even I had to admit a night off wouldn't kill me. Nathan Wilson wasn't what I expected. In a room full of banking professionals dressed in subtle variations of business casual, he stood out in his vintage rock band t-shirt and blazer. While others discussed market forecasts and property values, Nathan talked about how technology could revolutionize small business financing. His eyes lit up when he described his software idea, a platform that would democratize lending for entrepreneurs who fell through the cracks of traditional banking. "The problem is getting started," he confided later on Jessica's balcony, the sow. City lights twinkling below us. "Banks don't fund ideas, they fund proven concepts. But how do you prove a concept without funding?" 3 months into dating, Nathan's laptop died, the one containing all his prototype code. Between student loans and his modest IT consultant salary, replacing it wasn't feasible. I bought him a new one without hesitation, a top-of-the-line model that cost nearly 2 weeks of my salary. "You're investing in our future," he said, kissing me with genuine gratitude. "I'll make it worth every penny. I promise." By month 5, Nathan had quit his consulting job to develop his software full-time. His modest savings evaporated quickly, while investor meetings yielded nothing but vague interest and suggestions for extensive revisions. Almost imperceptibly, I began covering more of our dates, then his cell phone bill, then his portion of rent when we moved in together. "It's temporary," he assured me as we ate ramen noodles for the 3rd time that week. Once Seed Fund sees the finished prototype, everything changes. Then came the offer from Blueridge's London office, a fast track to senior analyst with international experience. It meant a year abroad, a substantial salary increase, and exposure to global markets. It also meant leaving Nathan behind at a critical juncture in his development process. "You should go," he said, but the defeated slump of his shoulders told a different story. "This is your dream job." It wasn't an easy decision, but love clouded my judgment. I declined the transfer, choosing instead to support the man who spoke so passionately about creating opportunities for others. 2 weeks later, during a company restructuring, my position was eliminated, Maybe this is a blessing in disguise, Nathan suggested, holding me while I tried to process the abrupt end of my career trajectory. Now, you can help me build our company. The descent happened gradually. First, I took an administrative position at Greenfield Elementary at half my previous salary. When that wasn't enough to cover our expenses and Nathan's development costs, I started morning shifts at Sunrise Coffee Shop. Eventually, I added weekend driving for rideshare to make ends meet. The worst part was running into former colleagues. Tom from accounting slid into my back seat one rainy Tuesday evening, his embarrassed recognition painful for us both. "Emily, I thought you were on the management track at Blueridge," I explained, about supporting Nathan's startup while maintaining a bright smile, how I was investing in our shared future. Tom's sympathetic nod couldn't quite mask the pity in his eyes. Meanwhile, Nathan worked furiously in our apartment, emerging only for coffee refills and the occasional meal. On the rare evenings when our schedules aligned, he'd talk excitedly about breakthroughs and potential investors, while I soaked my swollen feet and calculated whether we could afford both electricity and internet next month. We married at the courthouse with only Diane and Jessica as witnesses. My parents refused to attend. My father called Nathan a pipe dreamer, and my mother couldn't understand why I'd throw away a perfectly good career for some man's fantasy. Diane never bothered to hide her disapproval. From our first meeting, her thin-lipped smile communicated her belief that her son had settled for less than he deserved. "Nathan needs someone who understands his vision," she'd say, eyeing my coffee-stained uniform with barely concealed disdain. "Someone who can match his intellectual capacity." For our honeymoon, Nathan surprised me with tickets to Cancun. He'd convinced a potential investor to cover our travel expenses in exchange for an exclusive preview of his beta software. "We deserve this break," he insisted, though I knew we couldn't afford it. "The investor is covering everything." Cancun was beautiful but tense. Nathan spent most days in the business center of our resort, while I wandered the beaches alone. On our third night, his meeting with the investor Marcos Delgado went exceptionally well, resulting in a celebratory dinner where Nathan drank far too much tequila. While he slept off his excitement, I made a decision. I'd supported his dream, sacrificed my career, worked multiple jobs simultaneously, but I needed protection. Jessica had mentioned a former college classmate who practiced international business law and now lived in Mexico. A quick search and a desperate email later, and I had an appointment with Gabriela Ortiz the next morning. "What you're describing is substantial contribution to a business venture," Gabriela said after hearing my story. "In Mexico and the United States, this creates certain legal rights, but documenting them is crucial. Together, we drafted an agreement. Acknowledging my financial contributions entitled me to 45% ownership of the software and resulting company. We included specific language about my sweat equity, the years of supporting us financially while Nathan developed the product." That evening, amid more celebration and flowing drinks, I presented the document as partnership paperwork the investor needed for his records. Nathan, still riding the high of his successful meeting and influenced by several margaritas, signed without reading the details. "To our future," he toasted, completely unaware of what he'd just authorized. Back home, nothing changed. I worked. Nathan coded. Gradually, his software gained traction. A small investment here, a beta tester there. After 2 years of struggle, Finance Flow secured its first paying client. As business improved, our relationship deteriorated. Nathan started staying at the office, initially our second bedroom, then a small rented space in a business incubator. He hired an assistant, Vanessa, whose qualifications seemed primarily to be her model-like appearance and willingness to work flexible hours. Diane became increasingly present, offering business advice and reminding me at every opportunity that I wouldn't understand the complexities of what Nathan was building. By year 3, despite the company's growing client list, I was still working all 3 jobs. "We need to reinvest everything," Nathan insisted whenever I suggested cutting back my hours. This is how businesses grow. Yet somehow, Nathan's wardrobe improved. His discount store clothes were replaced by designer labels. His old Honda disappeared in favor of a leased luxury sedan. These were necessary business expenses, he explained, for making the right impression on clients. Meanwhile, I continued, wearing thrift shop clothes to my elementary school job and coffee-stained uniforms to the cafe. In our 5th year of marriage, I barely recognized either of us. The ambitious financial analyst and passionate programmer had been replaced by an exhausted worker bee and an increasingly distant CEO who now insisted on being called Nate in professional settings. The distance between us grew until we were strangers sharing an address. I became invisible, my sacrifices, my contributions, my very presence fading into the background of Nathan's increasingly successful story. I never imagined the end would begin with a text message. It was a Tuesday in April. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I had just finished my shift at Sunrise Coffee when my phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. Big news. Just closed Series A funding round. $2.5 million. We're scaling up immediately. I sat on a bench outside the coffee shop, my tired brain, struggling to process what this meant. For 6 years, we'd lived on promises and potential. Now, suddenly, it was real. Does this mean I can quit one of my jobs? I texted back, hope rising in my chest for the first time in years. His response came after a long delay. Let's not be hasty. We need to reinvest everything for maximum growth. But soon, I promise. 2 weeks later, finance flow moved from our spare bedroom to gleaming offices in the Oak Ridge Tech corridor. Nathan hired developers, marketers, and sales staff. He started wearing custom suits and coming home with stories about business lunches at restaurants I couldn't afford to eat at. Then came Vanessa. She's the most efficient executive assistant in the industry, Nathan explained over a rare dinner together. Her organizational skills are exactly what I need at this stage. Vanessa Collins was 26, with an MBA from an elite university and a wardrobe of sleek designer outfits. When I met her at the office opening party, she assessed me with cool professionalism. "Oh, you're Nathan's wife. How fascinating to finally meet you," she said, her smile never reaching her eyes. He hardly mentions his personal life at the office. I was wearing my best dress, 3 years old and purchased on clearance. While carrying a tray of homemade appetizers, I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. preparing after my rideshare shift. "Emily likes keeping things simple," Nathan interjected, gently, taking the tray from me. "Vanessa, could you show her where to set up the food? I need to greet the investors." That evening, I became the wife. Introduced briefly, then politely relegated to the background while Nathan shone at the center of his newly expanding universe. Diane arrived fashionably late, embracing her son with theatrical affection before surveying the gathering with calculating eyes. "Darling, I always knew this day would come," she gushed, straightening his tie. "You were destined for greatness." She acknowledged me with a curt nod. "Emily, the cheese tray needs refreshing. Be a dear." I swallowed my retort, reminding myself this was Nathan's moment. But something shifted that night. For the first time, I saw myself as others did, not as a partner in building something meaningful, but as an afterthought, a relic from the struggling days best kept in the background. The following months brought rapid change. Nathan hired a CFO despite my finance background and years managing the company's books. "We need someone with enterprise-level experience," he explained dismissively when I questioned the decision. "You've done your best, but we're in the major leagues now." My suggestions about financial strategy were increasingly met with patronizing smiles or outright dismissal. Meanwhile, Diane began appearing at the office regularly, attending meetings, and offering opinions on everything from marketing strategies to office decor. Mother has excellent taste and knows the right people, Nathan defended when I questioned her involvement. Her connections are opening doors for us. Those doors remained firmly closed to me. When I stopped by the office one afternoon, bringing lunch for Nathan as a surprise, I found the reception area transformed. Previously bare walls now displayed framed photos documenting the company's journey. Nathan pitching to investors. Nathan signing the funding deal. Nathan cutting the ribbon on the new office. Nathan accepting a local business innovation award. 6 years of history, carefully curated to erase any trace of my contribution. Can I help you? Vanessa's voice was professionally polite as she emerged from her office adjacent to Nathan's. I'm here to see my husband, I replied, suddenly feeling like I needed an appointment. He's in meetings all afternoon. Perhaps you should have called first. At home, Nathan began working later and later. His explanations evolved from apologetic to matter-of-fact to irritated when questioned. Building a company requires sacrifice, Emily. Surely you understand that. One night, exhausted from my shifts, I fell asleep on the couch waiting for him. His phone, left behind in his rush that morning, pinged with a message that lit up the screen. Working late again tonight. Ordered dinner from Castellano's. Your favorite booth in the back. Brr. I scrolled through their message history, my stomach tightening. Dozens of exchanges, increasingly personal. Inside jokes, compliments, late-night messages no executive assistant needed to send. When confronted, Nathan's denial came too quickly. She's being professional, anticipating my needs. That's literally her job. At midnight, commenting on how good you looked in your blue suit today. His expression hardened. You're being ridiculous. This is why I can't discuss business with you. You're too emotional, too small-minded. The man who once valued my financial acumen now spoke to me as if I were a child. The shift was subtle at first, a condescending tone here, an eye roll there, but it accelerated rapidly. My birthday passed without acknowledgement. Our anniversary became just another Tuesday. When Finance Flow was featured in a regional business magazine, my name wasn't mentioned once in the 3-page spread celebrating Nathan's solo journey to success. They interviewed you for 2 hours, I said, staring at the glossy photos of Nathan, Vanessa, and Diane posed in the sleek office. You never mentioned me once? He shrugged, barely glancing up from his laptop. It wasn't relevant to the business narrative. 6 years of my life, dismissed as irrelevant. The final confirmation came when I used Nathan's laptop to pay our bills, something I still handled despite the company's success. A document was minimized in the corner. A lease agreement for a luxury apartment downtown, effective immediately. That night, Nathan didn't come home until 2 a.m. When he did, he smelled of expensive perfume and rehearsed excuses. This isn't working anymore, he said flatly the next morning. We want different things. We, or you and Vanessa. His silence was answer enough. 2 days later, he moved out. 3 weeks after that, divorce papers arrived while I was tying my apron for my coffee shop shift. The settlement offered a one-time payment that amounted to less than a quarter of Nathan's annual salary. When I called Nathan in disbelief, Diane answered his phone. He's very busy, she said, satisfaction evident in her voice. The lawyers will handle everything from here. Though frankly, dear, you should be grateful for his generosity. What exactly did you contribute besides being a temporary support system? As I hung up, I remembered the agreement from Cancun, still sealed in its envelope and hidden in my old business textbook from college, the one book Nathan would never think to open. The legal document felt heavy in my hands as I slid it from the textbook. For a moment, I hesitated. Was I really ready to go to war with the man I had once loved enough to sacrifice everything for? My phone buzzed with a text from my coffee shop manager asking if I could cover an extra shift. The irony wasn't lost on me, still scraping for hours while my husband leased luxury apartments. That night, I made a decision. Before lawyers and courtrooms, Nathan deserved one last chance to do the right thing. I deserved one last chance to look him in the eyes when he refused. I arrived at Finance Flow headquarters just after 6 p.m., when most employees would be gone. The receptionist, someone I'd never met, looked startled when I walked in. "I'm sorry, we're closed for appointments. You'll need to... I'm here to see Nathan Wilson. I'm his wife." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, I didn't realize... Let me see if he's available." 5 minutes later, I was ushered into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Nathan sat behind an enormous desk, his expression carefully neutral. "This is unexpected," he said, not bothering to stand. "I thought we agreed to communicate through our attorneys." "No, you decided that. I never agreed to anything." I remained standing, refusing the chair he half-heartedly gestured toward. "I want to hear it from you directly. After everything we've been through, after everything I sacrificed, is this really what you're offering?" I placed the divorce papers on his desk. "Let's not be dramatic," he sighed, checking his watch. "Nobody forced you to work those jobs, Emily. You made your choices." "I didn't force you, but you were certainly happy to benefit from them." 6 years, Nathan. I put you through 6 years of startup life, and now you're compensating me with what amounts to 6 weeks of your current salary. "The settlement is more than generous," he said, an edge entering his voice. "What exactly do you think you're entitled to?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "What am I entitled to? I kept a roof over our heads. I paid for the prototypes, the equipment, the conference fees, all while you built your precious company. Minor contributions in the grand scheme," he dismissed. "You didn't code anything. You didn't pitch to investors. You didn't build client relationships." The casual dismissal felt like a physical blow. In that moment, I realized the man I married was truly gone, or perhaps had never existed at all. "Are you sleeping with Vanessa?" I asked bluntly. His momentary hesitation told me everything. "My personal life is no longer your concern," he replied coldly. "It became my concern when you were still sharing my bed while pursuing her. Was she the reason for all those late meetings?" Nathan stood abruptly. "I don't have to justify myself to you. Rebecca understands what it takes to build something meaningful. She supports my vision without constant complaints about money or attention. I supported your vision when it was nothing but lines of code on a secondhand laptop. I supported you when we ate ramen 4 nights a week so you could buy server space?" The door opened before he could respond. Diane stood there, her perfect blowout and designer suit making me acutely aware of my coffee-stained uniform. "I thought I heard raised voices," she said, eyes narrowing at me. "Nathan, you shouldn't be speaking to her alone. That's what we're paying the attorneys for." "We?" I echoed. "Since when are you paying for anything, Diane?" "I have always been my son's strongest advocate," she replied smoothly. "Something you clearly failed at." "I'm making demands?" I was incredulous. "I came here hoping for an honest conversation with my husband." "Ex-husband," Diane corrected. "Or very soon to be. The papers have been filed." "I'm aware. They were served to me between shifts at one of those jobs you both seem to think don't qualify as real work." Nathan at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "The timing wasn't intentional." "Nothing ever is with you, is it?" I moved toward the door, then paused. "Just tell me one thing. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me, or was I just a convenient ATM until something better came along?" His eyes met mine briefly, then slid away. "We wanted different things. It's that simple." "Such a shame," Diane added, unable to resist twisting the knife. "All those years wasted on someone who clearly wasn't your equal, but you've upgraded nicely." As if on cue, Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from confusion to cool assessment when she saw me. "Sorry to interrupt. The investors are on the conference call." "We'll be right there," Nathan replied, gratitude for the interruption evident in his voice. I looked between the three of them, my husband, his mother, his mistress, and felt something break free inside me. Not my heart. That had been breaking slowly for months. This was different. This was the last thread of hope that there might be some amicable resolution, some acknowledgement of our shared history. "Goodbye, Nathan," I said quietly, walking past Vanessa without a second glance. That night, I sat alone in what had once been our apartment, surrounded by the modest furnishings we'd collected over 6 years of struggle. Photos still hung on the walls, evidence of happier times, of dreams we'd shared. I took them down one by one. For 3 days, I moved through, my shifts mechanically, serving coffee, filing school paperwork, driving strangers across town, all while a storm gathered inside me. Disbelief gave way to crushing sadness, then to something I hadn't expected: anger. Not just at Nathan or Diane or Vanessa, but at myself, for believing in someone who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone, for shrinking myself to fit into the space he'd allowed me, for forgetting my own worth. On the 4th day, I called in sick to all 3 jobs. Instead, I visited Heritage Trust Bank, where Nathan and I had opened a joint account years ago, an account I still dutifully deposited my paychecks into, despite rarely withdrawing anything for myself. William Harrison, the bank's owner, greeted me personally. As a former Blueridge investment analyst, I'd handled some of his bank's portfolios years ago. "Emily Parker," he said warmly, using my maiden name. "It's been too long. What brings you in today?" "I need to understand something about my accounts," I replied, my voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "And I need absolute discretion." An hour later, I left the bank with documented proof of what I'd suspected. 2 months ago, Nathan had transferred nearly all our savings, $42,000 I had painstakingly set aside over years of multiple jobs, into a new account under his name. Alone. The same week, an identical amount was transferred to Vanessa Collins. I also left with something else: William Harrison's personal business card and a letter on bank letterhead detailing the suspicious transactions. "If you need anything else," he'd said, his eyes kind but his expression grim, "don't hesitate to call. What he's done isn't just morally reprehensible, it potentially crosses legal lines." With this evidence in hand, I called the number of attorney Rachel Martinez, whose card a regular customer at the diner had slipped me months ago when Nathan first started working late. "This is Emily Wilson," I said when she answered. "I understand. You specialize in divorce cases involving undisclosed financial transactions." "I do," she replied simply. "Why don't you tell me your situation?" As I began to explain, I felt something shifting inside me. The first sparks of determination replacing the ashes of what had been. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about standing up and being counted, about becoming visible again. Rachel Martinez was everything I needed in an attorney: sharp, uncompromising, and undeterred by Nathan's growing status in the business community. When I showed her the Cancun agreement and the bank records, she smiled for the first time. "Mrs. Wilson, your husband has made a serious miscalculation." The first court date arrived 3 weeks later. I'd pawned my wedding ring to cover Rachel's retainer. The small diamond had once seemed like the most precious thing in the world. Nathan had saved for months to buy it, or so he'd claimed. Now I wondered if that too had been a manipulation. I arrived at the Oak Ridge County Courthouse early, dressed in my interview suit from my Blue Ridge days. It was slightly outdated and a bit loose after years of running between jobs had whittled away at my frame. Rachel met me on the courthouse steps, her sleek briefcase and confident stride a reassuring contrast to my nervous energy. "Remember what we discussed?" she said quietly as we walked through security. Stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Let me handle the objections. We were the first to arrive in the assigned courtroom, a strategic decision on Rachel's part to help settle my nerves. 20 minutes later, the doors swung open with theatrical timing. Nathan entered first, wearing what I recognized as a custom-tailored suit that cost more than 3 months of my rent. Behind him strode a phalanx of 4 attorneys, each carrying identical leather portfolios embossed with the gold logo of Harrington and Walsh, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Vanessa followed, dressed in a conservative navy dress that successfully communicated professional colleague rather than other woman. Her eyes met mine briefly before sliding away. Last came Diane, her entrance carefully calculated for maximum impact in her cream designer suit and pearl earrings. She placed a protective hand on Nathan's shoulder as they took their seats, deliberately angling her body to create a visual barrier between us. "Well," Rachel murmured, "they certainly want to put on a show." Judge Howard entered promptly at 9 a.m. In his mid-60s, with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, he commanded immediate respect with a single sweeping glance across the courtroom. "Let's dispense with unnecessary theatrics," he announced after the preliminary introductions. "Wilson versus Wilson, petition for dissolution of marriage. I've reviewed the initial filings. Mr. Blackwell, you may begin." James Blackwell, Sr., partner and lead counsel for Nathan, approached the podium with the confidence of a man accustomed to winning. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. My client, Nathan Wilson, founder and CEO of Finance Flow Technologies, is seeking an equitable dissolution of his marriage to Emily Wilson. We've offered a generous settlement that Mrs. Wilson has inexplicably rejected. We reject the characterization of generous, Your Honor," Rachel countered immediately. "My client contributed substantially to building Mr. Wilson's business over 6 years of marriage. The proposed settlement represents a fraction of what she is rightfully entitled to." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps we should establish exactly what contributions Mrs. Wilson made to her husband's business success." What followed was a systematic dismantling of my work history. Blackwell called Nathan to the stand first, establishing his credentials as a visionary entrepreneur who built something from nothing through sheer determination and brilliance. When the questioning turned to me, the tone shifted dramatically. "Mr. Wilson, what employment did your wife maintain during your marriage?" Nathan cleared his throat. "Emily worked various jobs, mostly service positions. Could you be more specific?" "She was a barista at Sunrise Coffee. She drove for rideshare. She did administrative work at an elementary school." "And did she have any formal role at Finance Flow Technologies?" "No," Nathan replied. "She helped with some basic bookkeeping in the very beginning, but we outgrew her skill level quickly." Each word landed like a slap. 6 years of my life reduced to various jobs and skills that were quickly outgrown. When it was my turn to take the stand, Blackwell approached with practiced sympathy. "Mrs. Wilson, could you tell the court your current employment situation?" "I currently work 3 jobs. I'm an administrative assistant at Greenfield Elementary during the day. I work as a barista at Sunrise Coffee 4 evenings a week, and I drive for rideshare on weekends." "And your annual income from these combined positions?" I swallowed hard. "Approximately $38,000 last year." "Less than 1/8 of your husband's current salary," Blackwell observed. "Would you say financial considerations motivated your marriage to Mr. Wilson?" Rachel objected immediately. "Argumentative and offensive, Your Honor." "Sustained," Judge Howard agreed, eyeing Blackwell coldly. "Counsel will refrain from such insinuations." But the damage was done. The narrative was being carefully constructed. Nathan, the brilliant provider, me, the underemployed wife seeking a payday. The questioning continued relentlessly, picking apart every financial decision, every career choice I'd made. Why had I left Blueridge Investments? Why hadn't I pursued other opportunities in finance? Wasn't it true that I'd chosen these menial jobs because they were less demanding? By lunchtime, I was exhausted. In the courthouse bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, trying to compose myself for the afternoon session. "You're doing well," Rachel assured me. "The judge isn't buying their character assassination. He's been watching you carefully." The afternoon brought Diane to the stand, perfectly coiffed and rehearsed. "Mrs. Wilson, how would you characterize your son's marriage?" Diane adjusted her pearls. "Nathan is exceptionally generous. He supported Emily's choices even when they limited their lifestyle. He never pressured her to find more suitable employment." "And did you observe Mrs. Wilson contributing to your son's business success?" "Not in any meaningful way," Diane replied, with practiced regret. "Nathan built that company through countless sleepless nights and brilliant innovation. Emily seemed content to remain on the periphery." Her testimony continued, painting a portrait of a young entrepreneur burdened by an unambitious wife who then had the audacity to claim credit for his success. By late afternoon, the atmosphere in the courtroom was stifling. Judge Howard called a brief recess before closing arguments. "We're not waiting anymore," I whispered to Rachel. "I want to present the bank records and William Harrison's letter, now." We agreed to hold them for rebuttal if needed. "They're burying me. I can't sit through another hour of this." When proceedings resumed, Blackwell launched into a practice summation. Judge Howard listened impassively until Nathan suddenly interrupted his own attorney. "Your Honor, may I speak directly?" he asked, with the confidence of someone unaccustomed to being refused. Judge Howard raised an eyebrow but nodded. Nathan turned slightly, ensuring his profile was directed toward the judge, but his words carried to the entire courtroom. "I built something meaningful, something that employs dozens of people and helps hundreds of small businesses. I did that, not Emily." His voice hardened. "She's only after my wealth. She never even worked a real job." The courtroom fell silent. 6 years of sacrifice reduced to mockery by the man I had given everything for. His mother, Diane, sat behind. Him, nodding smugly, her manicured nails tapping against the polished wooden bench. I stood up, my legs trembling, but my voice steady. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit these bank records and a letter from William Harrison, owner of Heritage Trust Bank." The manila envelope felt warm in my hands as I passed it to Rachel, who approached the bench with measured steps. Judge Howard accepted the documents with a raised eyebrow. "Bank records. Mr. Blackwell, were you aware of these documents?" The attorney's composure slipped momentarily as he glanced back at Nathan, whose expression had transformed from smug confidence to dawning horror. "Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing of any relevant bank records. We question their authenticity and relevance at this late stage." Rachel smiled thinly. "The documents are dated and notarized by Mr. Harrison himself yesterday. They show Mr. Wilson transferring $42,000, the entirety of the couple's joint savings account, to a private account and subsequently to Ms. Vanessa Collins 2 months ago. The funds were accumulated primarily through Mrs. Wilson's multiple jobs. Over 6 years, Judge Howard adjusted his glasses, scanning the pages with increasing interest. "These appear to be in order. Mr. Harrison has also included a personal statement. Would you care to summarize the relevant portions for the court, Ms. Martinez?" "Certainly, Your Honor. Mr. Harrison attests that Mrs. Wilson made 94% of all deposits into the joint savings account over the past 6 years, while maintaining all household expenses from her separate checking account. Furthermore, he states that when Mr. Wilson requested the transfer, he specifically said the funds were for business expansion, not personal use or transfer to a third party." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Across the aisle, Nathan's face had gone pale. He whispered frantically to Blackwell, who appeared equally blindsided. Diane's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat, her expression oscillating between disbelief and outrage. "Furthermore," Rachel continued over the commotion, "I'd like to submit this agreement signed in Cancun, Mexico during the couple's honeymoon. Acknowledging Mrs. Wilson's substantial financial contributions to Finance Flow's founding and establishing her as entitled to 45% of the company in recognition of her direct investment and sweat equity. Judge Howard silenced the room with a single sharp rap of his gavel. "Mr. Wilson, do you recognize your signature on these documents?" Nathan stood slowly, tugging at his collar. "Your Honor, I may have signed something in Cancun, but I wasn't fully aware of the contents. It was our honeymoon. There was tequila involved." "Are you suggesting you were intoxicated when you signed a legal document, Mr. Wilson?" The judge's tone made it clear this wasn't a favorable defense. Not intoxicated, perhaps, but not fully cognizant of what I was signing. I couldn't help but speak up. He was sober enough to meet with investor Marcos Delgado that same day and secure our first round of funding. Judge Howard nodded thoughtfully. "Ms. Martinez, please continue." Rachel proceeded to enumerate the years of multiple jobs I had worked, the specific amounts I had contributed to business expenses. Rachel proceeded to enumerate the years of multiple jobs I had worked, the specific amounts I had contributed to business expenses, and the unpaid hours I had devoted to administrative support during the company's earliest days. Mrs. Wilson didn't simply support her husband emotionally, Your Honor. She financially underwrote his dream while working 3 jobs simultaneously. Finance Flow Technologies exists today because of her sacrifice and direct financial investment. For the next 20 minutes, the courtroom was transformed. No longer was I the gold-digging wife seeking an unearned payday. Instead, the portrait emerging was of a woman who had invested years of labor and thousands of dollars into a partnership, only to be erased from the narrative once success arrived. Judge Howard listened intently, occasionally directing questions to both attorneys. As Rachel concluded her presentation, the judge removed his glasses and addressed the courtroom. "I'm recessing for 30 minutes to review these documents thoroughly. When we reconvene, I'll deliver my preliminary ruling on property division and ownership recognition." Her gaze swept across Nathan's legal team. "I suggest you use this time to confer with your client about a more realistic approach to settlement." In the hallway outside, Rachel squeezed my arm gently. "That went better than we could have hoped. The judge clearly sees the inequity here." Before I could respond, Blackwell approached, his earlier confidence notably diminished. "Ms. Martinez, Mrs. Wilson, a word." He glanced around, ensuring privacy. "My client is prepared to offer a significantly improved settlement if you're willing to negotiate outside the courtroom." I thought of all the nights I'd driven strangers across town while Nathan worked on his code. The holidays I'd missed with family because I couldn't afford time off from multiple jobs. The dreams I'd deferred while nurturing his. 45%, I replied calmly. "That's not negotiable, but I'm willing to discuss terms for how we structure the business relationship moving forward." Blackwell's mouth tightened. "That's entirely unreasonable. The company has grown far beyond its initial—" "Due to my client's continued financial support," Rachel interjected. "And let's not forget the $42,000 Mr. Wilson transferred to Ms. Collins. Money primarily saved by my client, I should add." A flash of something, recognition, perhaps even shame, crossed Blackwell's face. 10% ownership and triple the current settlement offer. I shook my head. The Cancun agreement stands, 45%, and William Harrison has already agreed to testify if necessary. When we reconvened, Judge Howard didn't waste time on preambles. "Having reviewed the prenuptial agreement from Cancun and the bank records, I find sufficient evidence to warrant a complete reassessment of the proposed settlement. Mrs. Wilson is hereby recognized as having made substantial financial contributions to Finance Flow Technologies throughout its development phase, entitling her to significant consideration in the division of marital assets." She peered at Nathan over her glasses. "Mr. Wilson, the court takes a dim view of the unauthorized transfer of jointly accumulated funds, particularly when documentation suggests those funds were primarily saved by your spouse while working multiple jobs." Across the aisle, Diane clutched her pearls so tightly I feared they might snap. Vanessa stared straight ahead, carefully avoiding eye contact with anyone. Nathan himself seemed to have aged years in a single afternoon, his confidence replaced by a man confronting the consequences of his own actions. Furthermore, the judge continued, given Mrs. Wilson's documented ownership stake in a growing company, I'm ordering a freeze on all business accounts pending full financial discovery. The parties will attend mediation to determine equitable division of business interests, or alternatively to negotiate a buyout of Mrs. Wilson's interest at fair market value. As we left the courtroom, I felt strangely hollow. The victory was comprehensive, the vindication absolute. But 6 years of my life had still been reduced to percentages and dollar amounts. No legal ruling could restore the trust I had lost, not just in Nathan, but in my own judgment. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters had gathered, alerted, to the unexpected twist in what had appeared to be a routine divorce case. Rachel fielded their questions expertly while I stood silently beside her, still processing the day's events. Mrs. Wilson, how does it feel to be revealed as the hidden partner behind Finance Flow's success? One reporter called out. Before I could answer, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. Emily isn't speaking today, Nathan announced, emerging from the courthouse with his entourage. This is a private matter that we'll resolve professionally. I met his gaze directly for the first time since his courtroom outburst. Actually, I think I've been silent long enough. Turning to the reporters, I spoke with a clarity that surprised even me. Finance Flow was built on partnership, sacrifice, and shared vision. I look forward to its continued success. Whether I remain involved or not will depend on how genuine the commitment to partnership proves to be moving forward. Later that evening, as I unlocked the door to my small apartment, my phone buzzed, with a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is William Harrison. Just checking you're all right after today's proceedings. My door is always open if you need anything. I smiled, feeling the first hint of something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. The following weeks brought a cascade of changes. Nathan's legal team, recognizing their weakened position, made a series of increasingly reasonable settlement offers. Rachel advised patience. They're scrambling, she observed during one of our strategy sessions. The recent venture capital investment complicates things for them. The new investors aren't happy about the ownership dispute. She was right. 2 days later, I received a call from Nathan's new lead attorney. Blackwell had been replaced, requesting an urgent meeting. The conference room at Rachel's office felt miles away from the sterile courthouse. Nathan arrived alone, without his mother or Vanessa, looking less like the confident CEO and more like the man I had once known. Dark circles under his eyes suggested sleepless nights. Thank you for agreeing to meet, he began, his voice lacking its usual polish. I wanted to discuss this directly, without the lawyers dominating the conversation. Rachel raised an eyebrow. My client has agreed to hear you out, but I'll remain present. Nathan nodded. That's fair. He took a deep breath. Finance Flow is at a critical juncture. The funding round that closed last month is contingent on stable leadership and clear ownership structure. The situation between us is complicating things. You mean your unauthorized transfer of joint funds to your girlfriend and attempts to deny my ownership stake are complicating things, I corrected. He flinched but didn't argue. I've come to propose a structured buyout. You'll receive 40% ownership value based on the recent valuation, plus the return of the transferred funds with interest, and an additional compensation package for the years of support. Rachel and I exchanged glances. The offer was substantial, far more than we'd expected to negotiate. Why not the full 45% specified in the agreement? Rachel asked. 5% remains in dispute due to intellectual property considerations, Nathan's attorney explained. However, we're prepared to offer additional compensation to offset the difference. And Vanessa? I couldn't help asking. Will she be returning the funds as well? Nathan's expression tightened. That situation has been addressed. She's no longer with the company. Something in his tone told me there was more to that story, but I didn't press. Some details weren't relevant anymore. After 2 hours of negotiation, we reached preliminary terms. I would receive a substantial upfront payment representing my ownership stake, ongoing royalties from the original software platform I had helped, fund and full acknowledgement in the company's official history as a founding contributor. As Nathan gathered his papers to leave, he paused. For what it's worth, I never intended things to end this way. Which way was that? I asked quietly. With me being erased or with you being caught? He had no answer. 3 days later, William Harrison called me personally. I heard the negotiations went well. I hope you don't mind that Nathan's attorney contacted me regarding the financial arrangements. Not at all, I assured him. Your testimony was instrumental. I can't thank you enough. Actually, he said, I was calling for another reason. Blueridge Investments has been considering expanding their advisory services to focus on small business funding, particularly for women entrepreneurs. Given your unique experience on both sides of the equation, they asked if I knew anyone suitable to head up the initiative. Your name came to mind immediately. The opportunity was everything I could have hoped for, a chance to use both my financial background and the hard-won knowledge from years of struggling alongside a startup. The salary they offered was 3 times what I currently earned across all 3 jobs. Would it be strange working with my former employer? I asked. William chuckled. They were quite explicit that letting you go was one of their bigger mistakes. Sometimes the long road teaches us what we need to know. 2 months later, I stood at the window of my new downtown office, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. The divorce was finalized, the settlement implemented, and for the first time in years, I was working a single job that challenged and fulfilled me. My assistant, yes, I now had an assistant, knocked gently before entering. Your 5 o'clock appointment is here, and these just arrived. She placed a tasteful arrangement of lilies on my desk alongside a small envelope. Inside was a brief note. Congratulations on the new position. Well deserved. W.H. I smiled, placing the card on my desk before welcoming my appointment. A young woman with a brilliant idea for an educational technology platform, but no idea how to secure funding. The first thing you need to understand, I began, is that your value to your company goes far beyond the initial investment. Let me help you document that properly from the start. 6 months into my new role at Blueridge, I had established a reputation for tough but fair investment assessments. My experience on both sides of the funding equation gave me unique insight, and my personal story, which had made brief headlines in local business news, brought clients specifically seeking my guidance. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. There's a Ms. Diane Wilson here without an appointment. She says it's personal. I almost refused to see her. Our last interaction in the courtroom had left little doubt about her opinion of me. Curiosity won out. Diane entered my office with none of her usual imperious confidence. The designer suit remained, but something in her posture had changed. Thank you for seeing me, she began, declining my offer to sit. I won't take much of your time. What can I do for you, Diane? She placed a small box on my desk. These belong to Nathan's grandmother. He wanted you to have them. I opened the box to find a pair of pearl earrings. Not the ostentatious ones Diane typically wore, but simple, elegant studs that I had admired years ago. Why wouldn't he bring these himself? I asked, confused by this unexpected gesture. Diane's expression tightened. Nathan is not in a good place. The situation with Vanessa? She trailed off. What situation? She hesitated, clearly debating how much to share. It seems your suspicions were correct, but not in the way you thought. Vanessa wasn't just sleeping with my son. She was selling company information to competitors. The money Nathan transferred, your money, was part of her manipulation. When it all came out, several investors pulled their support. I sat back, absorbing this information. I'm sorry to hear that. And surprisingly, I meant it. Despite everything, seeing Nathan fail completely wasn't something I wished for. Finance Flow is struggling to survive the scandal. Nathan may lose everything. For the first time since I'd known her, Diane's perfect composure cracked. I was wrong about you, Emily. I thought you were beneath him, using him. I couldn't have been more mistaken. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I took no pleasure in her admission. We all made mistakes, Diane. She nodded once, then turned to leave. At the door, she paused. He mentions you sometimes, says you were the smartest decision he ever made, and letting you go was his worst. After she left, I sat looking at the pearl earrings for a long time. They represented something from a past that no longer defined me, yet had shaped me in ways I was only beginning to appreciate. That weekend, Jessica convinced me to join her for dinner at the Silver Spoon, the upscale restaurant where Nathan and I had once celebrated our anniversary in the early days, splitting a single dessert because we couldn't afford two. You need to get out more, she insisted. All work and no play makes Emily a dull financial advisor. The restaurant had changed little, still offering the perfect balance of elegance and warmth. As we were being seated, I noticed a familiar figure dining, alone at a corner table. Nathan looked up at the same moment, our eyes meeting across the room. He looked different, the designer suit replaced by a simple button-down shirt, the confident posture now slightly hunched. He nodded in acknowledgement but made no move to approach. I returned the gesture and focused on my dinner with Jessica. As we were leaving, the maitre d' handed me a note. The gentleman in the corner asked me to give you this. In Nathan's distinctive handwriting were just a few words. You deserved better. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see that. I didn't respond to the note. Some bridges, once burned, are better left as monuments to lessons learned, but I kept it alongside the pearl earrings in a small box, not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder of how far I had come. 3 weeks later, William Harrison invited me to lunch. What I had assumed would be a casual meal turned into something more significant when he introduced me to the other guests. Representatives from a venture capital firm specializing in women-led startups. Emily's insight into both traditional finance and the practical challenges of startup funding is exactly what our portfolio companies need, William explained. Her personal experience navigating the emotional and financial complexities makes her uniquely qualified to advise our entrepreneurs. By dessert, I had been offered a position as senior advisor to their fund, with the freedom to continue my work at Blueridge while consulting on their investment decisions. The opportunity would double my already substantial income and put me in position to guide funding decisions for dozens of promising female entrepreneurs. As William and I walked back to our respective offices, he asked casually, "Have you heard the latest about Finance Flow?" I shook my head. I had deliberately avoided news about the company. They're restructuring completely. Nathan stepped down as CEO last week. The board brought in new leadership after the security breach was fully investigated. He glanced at me. Your ex-husband approached me yesterday about a personal loan. Apparently, he invested everything he had back into the company trying to save it. Did you approve the loan? I asked, surprised to find I cared about the answer. No, but I did offer him something else, a junior position in our risk assessment department. His experience in what not to do might prove valuable, don't you think? I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. That's either incredibly kind or supremely just. William smiled. Perhaps a bit of both. People deserve second chances, but they should earn them. That evening, as I packed up my office, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 7 years. From rising financial analyst to coffee shop barista to division head at a major investment firm, with detours through heart-wrenching, betrayal, and courtroom vindication. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Celebration dinner this weekend for the new position? You're buying this time, Ms. Fancy Investment Advisor?" I smiled, texting back my agreement. As I slipped my phone into my purse, I noticed the small box containing the pearl earrings and Nathan's note. After a moment's consideration, I put them on. Not because they connected me to Nathan or our past, but because they represented something. I had finally learned my value wasn't determined by someone else's assessment. 1 year after the courthouse confrontation that had changed everything, I stood at the podium of the Oak Ridge Women in Business Annual Conference, preparing to address a room full of aspiring entrepreneurs. In the audience, I spotted William, Harrison, Rachel Martinez, and several of the women I had helped secure funding over the past months. My journey began with a dream, I started. Not my own, but someone else's. I believed in that dream so completely that I lost sight of myself. In the process, I paused, looking out at the attentive faces. That was my first mistake, but also my greatest lesson. Supporting someone's vision doesn't require erasing your own. As I continued my speech, outlining the practical steps women could take to protect their interests while building businesses together with partners, I noticed a late arrival slipping into the back row. Nathan sat quietly, listening as I shared the wisdom gleaned from our failed partnership. After the presentation, during the networking reception, he approached cautiously, maintaining a respectful distance. "That was an excellent speech," he said simply. "You always did understand the financial structures better than I did." "Thank you," I replied, noticing the changes in him. Gone was the arrogant startup founder who had dismissed my contributions. In his place stood someone more subdued, perhaps even humbled. "William mentioned you're working in risk assessment now." He nodded, starting from the bottom again. "It's been educational." He hesitated. "Emily, I know it doesn't change anything, but I wanted to tell you in person. You were right. About everything. The company didn't succeed because of my genius. It succeeded despite my hubris. You were the foundation that made it all possible, and I failed to recognize that until it was too late." I studied him for a moment, searching for the manipulative charm that had once swayed me. Instead, I found only genuine regret. "We both made mistakes, Nathan. I allowed myself to be erased. That won't happen again. I heard about your new venture fund for women entrepreneurs. It's a brilliant concept." I smiled. "I learned from experience what these women need. Someone who understands both sides of the equation and won't let them be taken advantage of. They're lucky to have you." He glanced around the crowded reception. "I should go. I just wanted to say congratulations. You deserve this success." As he turned to leave, I found myself calling after him. "Nathan." He paused. "Thank you for the earrings. They're beautiful." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. "You're wearing them. They remind me of something important." I touched one pearl gently. "That my value isn't determined by someone else's assessment." He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "No, it never was." That night, as I drove home in the gentle spring rain, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me full circle. The young financial analyst who had abandoned her promising career for love had been replaced by a wiser, stronger woman who had reclaimed not just her financial worth, but something far more valuable, her voice. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone silence it. When I arrived home, a message was waiting on my answering machine. William Harrison's voice filled my apartment. "Emily, I just left the conference. Brilliant speech. Listen, something unexpected has come up. Heritage Trust Bank is looking for..." a new director of our small business division. The board specifically requested someone with your unique perspective. It would mean developing funding programs for exactly the type of entrepreneurs you've been advocating for. Call me tomorrow to discuss. This could be the perfect platform for the ideas you've been developing. I replayed the message twice, letting the possibilities wash over me. From supporting someone else's dream to creating opportunities for others to achieve theirs, the symmetry felt right. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number wasn't one I recognized, but something compelled me to answer. Hello? Mrs. Wilson? This is Agnes Chen. We met at the conference today? The voice was tentative but determined. You mentioned during your talk that you help women document their contributions to business partnerships. I think I need your help. My husband and I started a catering company 3 years ago, and lately he's been making decisions without consulting me, taking credit for my recipes, my client relationships. As I listened to her story, so painfully familiar, I felt a sense of purpose crystallize within me. This wasn't just about my career anymore. It was about ensuring that other women didn't have to learn these lessons the hard way. Agnes, first, take a deep breath. You're not alone in this situation. Second, I have some time tomorrow morning. Why don't you come to my office and we'll start documenting everything properly? After we arranged the details, I sat in the quiet of my living room, thinking about the strange path that had led me here. From supporting Nathan's dream to helping women protect their own, from being silenced to finding my voice, from financial analyst to advocate and advisor. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan's betrayal had ultimately guided me to my true purpose. In trying to erase me from his success story, he had inadvertently helped me discover my own. The following morning, I arrived at my office earlier than usual to prepare for my meeting with Agnes. On my desk, my assistant had placed the day's newspaper, opened to the business section. A small headline caught my eye. Finance Flow Technologies acquired in rescue deal, former CEO departs. The article detailed how the company Nathan and I had built together had been purchased at a fraction of its former valuation following the security breach scandal. Nathan had been removed completely from the organization as part of the deal. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a complicated mixture of emotions, a whisper of regret for what might have been, acknowledgement of the lessons learned, and gratitude for the unexpected path those difficult years had ultimately led me down. When Agnes arrived 30 minutes later, clutching a folder of hastily gathered documents, I recognized the worried expression she wore, the same one I had seen in my own mirror not so long ago. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, her voice unsteady. "I don't know if anything can be done at this point, but..." "Let me stop you right there," I said gently. "A year ago, I was sitting exactly where you are now, thinking it was too late to reclaim what I'd contributed. I was wrong, and so are you. Let's start at the beginning, document everything, and make sure you're never erased from your own story." As we began the painstaking process of reconstructing her contributions to the business she had helped build, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a sense of having come full circle, of using my painful past to illuminate someone else's path forward. Later that afternoon, I took a call from William Harrison about the bank position. As we discussed the possibilities, he mentioned something that brought our conversation to a momentary halt. "By the way, did you hear about Nathan? After the acquisition announcement, he came to see me again. No requests this time, just to inform me he's leaving Oak Ridge. Said there's nothing left for him here." I absorbed this information silently, unsure how to respond. "Emily, are you still there?" "Yes," I said finally. "I hope he finds what he's looking for." "He already did," William replied quietly. "He just didn't recognize it until it was gone." After we ended the call, I walked to my office window, gazing out at the city where my life had unraveled and reconstructed itself in ways I could never have imagined. The journey had been painful, the lessons hard-won, but standing here now, respected, independent, and helping others navigate similar challenges, I wouldn't have changed a moment of it. The intercom buzzed. "Your next appointment is here, Ms. Parker." I smiled at the use of my maiden name, which I'd reclaimed after the divorce was finalized. "Send her in." As I turned to greet my next client, I caught sight of my reflection in the window glass. Shoulders back, head high, pearl earrings catching the afternoon light. Not Nathan's wife, not the woman who had been erased. Simply me, Emily Parker. Finally, the author of my own story. The Heritage Trust Bank Director position changed everything. 6 months into my new role, I'd already implemented a specialized lending program for women entrepreneurs that was generating significant positive press for the bank. My office walls, once bare, now displayed framed articles about our initiatives and photos of successful business owners we'd helped fund. My morning routine had transformed completely. Instead of rushing between multiple jobs, I now spent my early hours reviewing applications and preparing for investment committee meetings. My assistant, Gabriella, had proven to be exceptionally capable, handling my increasingly busy schedule with remarkable efficiency. "Ms. Parker, your 9:30 is here," Gabriella announced through the intercom, "and Mr. Harrison would like to see you before the board meeting at 11. "Send in my 9:30 and tell William I'll stop by his office at 10:45, I replied, straightening the papers on my desk. Megan Torres entered my office with the nervous energy of someone carrying too many dreams and too few resources, a feeling I remembered intimately. At 32, she had developed an innovative childcare scheduling application while working full-time as a pediatric nurse. "Thank you for meeting with me, Ms. Parker," she began, sitting carefully on the edge of the chair opposite my desk. "Your assistant mentioned you're particularly interested in technology solutions for working parents." I smiled, remembering how it felt to sit on the wrong side of the power dynamic. "Let's start with the basics. How much capital are you seeking? And what stage is your application in?" For the next 45 minutes, Megan outlined her business plan with increasing confidence. Her concept was sound, addressing a genuine need in the marketplace, but her financial projections needed significant refinement. "Here's what I propose," I said as our meeting concluded. "We'll assign you one of our financial advisors to help strengthen your projections and valuation model. Once those are updated, I'd like you to return for a second review. Your concept has merit, Ms. Torres, but we need to ensure the numbers support your vision." The relief on her face was palpable. That's more encouragement than I've received from any other bank. Most loan officers stopped listening as soon as I mentioned I was a nurse, not a software developer. "Their loss," I replied, walking her to the door. "Innovation comes from unexpected places. I should know. I once worked 3 jobs to fund someone else's tech startup." After Megan left, I reviewed several pending applications before heading to William's office. As the bank's president, William Harrison had transformed Heritage Trust from a conservative local institution into a forward-thinking financial partner for emerging businesses. His corner office reflected his blend of traditional banking values and progressive vision, classic wood furnishings complemented by modern art and technology. "Emily, come in," he greeted warmly. "How was your meeting with the nurse-turned-developer?" "Promising," I replied, taking a seat in one of his visitor chairs. "Her concept addresses a real pain point. The financials need work, but that's what our advisory team is for." William nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why I wanted you heading this division. You see potential where traditional bankers see only risk." He leaned forward, his expression turning more serious. "Have you reviewed the quarterly numbers yet?" "Just this morning. The Women's Entrepreneurship Fund is outperforming projections by 17%. Default rates are substantially lower than our traditional small business loans." "The board has noticed," William said with a slight smile. "Which brings me to the reason I wanted to see you before the meeting. We're expanding the program's funding by an additional $10 million for the next fiscal year. I blinked in surprise. That's double our current allocation. Your success has made quite an impression, Emily. You've proven that investing in women-led businesses isn't just socially responsible, it's financially sound. He paused, studying me thoughtfully. There's something else. The chairman is creating a new executive position, Chief Innovation Officer. He'd like you to consider it. Me? The question escaped before I could mask my surprise. I've only been with Heritage for 6 months. 6 months in which you've revolutionized our approach to small business lending. The position would give you oversight of all emerging market initiatives, including the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund you've built. He handed me a folder. Review the details. We'll discuss it more after you've had time to consider. As I walked back to my office, the folder felt unnaturally heavy in my hands. Just 18 months ago, I had been juggling 3 minimum wage jobs while my husband dismissed my contributions. Now I was being offered an executive position at one of the city's most respected financial institutions. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and calls. It wasn't until I was driving home that evening that I fully processed the magnitude of the opportunity William had presented. The salary alone was staggering. Nearly 5 times what Nathan had been paying himself when we separated. And that didn't include the stock options and performance bonuses. My phone rang through my car's speaker system. Jessica's name flashed on the dashboard display. "Hey, stranger," she greeted when I answered. "Are we still on for dinner tomorrow, or has your fancy banking career made you too important for old friends?" I laughed, grateful for Jessica's grounding presence in my life. "I'm not only still on for dinner, but I'm buying. I have news." "Ooh, mysterious. Should I book somewhere fancy where you can show off your new expense account?" "Let's stick with Salvatore's," I suggested, mentioning the Italian restaurant where we'd been meeting for years. Some things shouldn't change, even when everything else does. After we hung up, I found myself taking the long route home, driving past neighborhoods I rarely visited anymore. Without consciously deciding to, I turned onto Maple Avenue, slowing. As I approached the small apartment complex where Nathan and I had lived during those lean startup years. The building looked exactly as I remembered, slightly shabby but well-maintained, with window boxes full of seasonal flowers. For a moment, I was transported back to those early days, when Nathan would work through the night at our small kitchen table, his enthusiasm infectious as he described the future he envisioned for us. Before success changed him. Before I became invisible. My reverie was interrupted by a text notification. Glancing at my phone, I saw a message from Rachel Martinez, the attorney who had represented me during the divorce. "Thought you might want to know. Finance Flow Technologies officially filed for bankruptcy protection today. Reorganization plan includes complete management change. Call if you want details." I sat in my car, staring at the message, unsure how to feel. The company Nathan and I had built together, the dream I had sacrificed so much for, was failing without either of us at the helm. There was no satisfaction in this news, only a complicated mixture of emotions. Regret for what might have been, vindication that perhaps my contributions had been more valuable than Nathan had acknowledged, and a strange sense of closure. Instead of continuing home, I found myself driving toward the downtown business district. The gleaming high-rise that housed Finance Flow's offices came into view, its upper floors illuminated against the darkening sky. I pulled into a nearby parking garage and walked to the small park across from the building, taking a seat on a bench with a clear view of the entrance. I wasn't sure what I was doing there or what I expected to see. Perhaps some part of me needed to physically reconnect with this chapter of my life before finally closing it. For nearly an hour, I watched as late-working employees exited the building, hurrying toward parking garages or public transit stops, their faces showing varying degrees of strain. Just as I was about to leave, a familiar figure emerged through the revolving doors. Vanessa Collins looked markedly different from the polished, confident woman who had once dismissed me at the office opening. Her designer clothes remained, but her posture conveyed defeat rather than superiority as she glanced nervously at her phone. Without thinking, I stood and walked toward her. She noticed me when I was about 20 feet away, her eyes widening in recognition, and was that fear? "Emily," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." "I heard about the bankruptcy filing," I replied, studying the woman who had once been my husband's mistress and accomplice. Up close, she looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and tension lines around her mouth that makeup couldn't quite conceal. "Then you know more than most of the employees," she said bitterly. "Management didn't even have the decency to make an announcement. We found out from industry news alerts." I raised an eyebrow. "You're still with the company?" "I thought after the security breach." "I was cleared of the worst allegations," she said quickly. "Nathan tried to pin everything on me, but the investigation showed he was equally complicit in sharing proprietary information with potential investors." She laughed without humor. "Turns out we were both expendable once things went south." The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan always did have a talent for rewriting history to serve his purposes. Vanessa studied me for a long moment. "You know, he told me you were difficult, unsupportive, that you didn't understand his vision." She shook her head. "I should have recognized the pattern when he started saying the same things about me." "History repeats itself," I observed. "First as tragedy, then as farce." "Marx?" she asked, surprising me. I nodded. "My father was a literature professor. Some quotes stick with you." An awkward silence fell between us. Two women connected. By the same man, both ultimately discarded when we no longer served his narrative. "I owe you an apology," Vanessa said finally. "I knew you were still married when Nathan and I—" She trailed off. "I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that your relationship was already over. It was a convenient fiction. We all believe the stories that allow us to sleep at night," I replied, finding I had no energy for anger toward this woman. We had both been players in Nathan's elaborate production, cast in roles that served his ambitions. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Headhunters are already calling. Apparently, financial technology expertise is still in demand, even from failed startups." She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "And you? I heard you landed at Heritage Trust." "I did," I confirmed, offering no further details. "I should get going. It was interesting seeing you, Vanessa." As I turned to leave, she called after me. "Emily, he wasn't worth what either of us sacrificed for him." I looked back at her. On that, we can definitely agree. Driving home, I felt lighter somehow, as if that strange, unplanned encounter had released something I'd been carrying without realizing it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made my decision about William's offer. I would accept the Chief Innovation Officer position, but with certain conditions of my own. The following evening at Salvatore's, Jessica listened wide-eyed as I shared the details of William's offer and my unexpected encounter with Vanessa. "Chief Innovation Officer," she repeated, raising her wine glass. "From 3 jobs to the C-suite in less than 2 years. That has to be some kind of record." "It's still surreal," I admitted. "Sometimes I wake up thinking I need to hurry, or I'll be late for my coffee shop shift. And now you're positioned to approve or deny loans larger than most people's lifetime earnings." Jessica shook her head in amazement. "Have you decided to take it?" "Yes, but I'm proposing some modifications to the role. I want to maintain direct oversight of the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund, and I want to develop a special initiative for entrepreneurs who've experienced financial exploitation by business partners." Jessica's expression softened. "Taking your pain and transforming it into something that helps others. That's very you, Em." "It's not entirely altruistic," I admitted. Working with these women gives me a sense of purpose I never found supporting Nathan's dreams. Their success feels like redemption somehow. Speaking of Nathan, Jessica said carefully, have you heard from him since the bankruptcy news broke? I shook my head. Not directly. Rachel keeps me informed of any legal developments, but our personal communication ended after the divorce was finalized. I took a sip of wine, though Diane told me he mentions me sometimes. His mother? When did you speak with her? She visited my office about a month ago, returning some family jewelry Nathan wanted me to have. I touched one of the pearl earrings I'd taken to wearing regularly. She said he regrets how things ended. Do you believe her? I considered the question. I believe he regrets losing everything. Whether that includes genuine remorse for how he treated me? I shrugged. It doesn't really matter anymore. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics. Jessica's promotion at her graphic design firm, her new apartment, mutual friends from our pre-Nathan days who had recently reconnected with me. It felt good to laugh without reservation, to discuss future plans without calculating their impact on someone else's dreams. As we were finishing dessert, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. I would normally have ignored it during dinner, but the sender's name caught my attention. William Harrison. Sorry, Jess. Mind if I check this quickly? It's from William. She waved permission. Go ahead. I want to hear if it's about your counter-proposal. The email was brief, but significant. The board had unanimously approved my appointment as Chief Innovation Officer, including all my proposed modifications to the role. Furthermore, they had approved my request to establish a specialized advisory committee composed primarily of women with financial and entrepreneurial expertise. It's official, I told Jessica, setting down my phone. They approved everything, including my committee proposal. I start next month. This calls for another toast, Jessica declared, signaling the waiter for more wine. To Emily Parker, banking. Executive and champion of exploited entrepreneurs everywhere. I wouldn't go that far, I laughed, but accepted the toast nonetheless. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. My life had transformed so dramatically in such a short time that moments of quiet reflection had become essential for maintaining my balance. My phone chimed with a text message. The number wasn't in my contacts, but something about it seemed vaguely familiar. Heard about your promotion. Congratulations. You always were the financial genius between us. N. Nathan. After months of silence, he had reached out, presumably after hearing about my appointment. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen as I debated whether to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, to maintain the clean break I'd established. Another part felt a strange obligation to acknowledge his gesture, if only to demonstrate that I had moved beyond the anger that once defined my feelings toward him. After several minutes of deliberation, I typed a simple reply. Thank you. I hope you're finding your way forward as well. His response came almost immediately. Starting over at 35 wasn't in my business plan. Working for someone else even less. So? But it's a chance to rebuild differently this time. I hadn't heard that Nathan had found new employment. The last Rachel had mentioned he was struggling to find positions after the finance flow scandal. Curiosity got the better of me. You found a new position? I asked. Junior project manager at Meridian Technologies. The irony isn't lost on me. Back, where I started before finance flow, with considerably less authority. I remembered how Nathan had once described corporate employment as a soul-crushing prison for the unimaginative. His acceptance of such a position now spoke volumes about how dramatically his circumstances had changed. Rebuilding can be clarifying, I offered, unsure why I was continuing this conversation at all. Sometimes the second draft is better than the original. The literary professor's daughter emerges, he replied, referencing a detail about my family he had apparently remembered. Always the perfect metaphor. I didn't respond immediately, unsure where this exchange was heading or whether I wanted to encourage further communication. After several minutes, another message appeared. I owe you more apologies than I could possibly express via text. But, for what it's worth, I am sorry, Emily. Not just for how things ended, but for how they proceeded throughout. You deserved better. The words on my screen blurred slightly as unexpected tears welled in my eyes. Not tears of sadness or lingering attachment, but a release of something I hadn't realized I still carried. The need for acknowledgement, for validation that my perceptions of our shared history weren't merely bitter revisionism. Thank you for saying that, I replied simply. Would you consider meeting for coffee sometime? No agenda, no expectations. Just a conversation between two people with a complicated history. I sat with the question, examining my feelings carefully. Did I want to revisit that chapter of my life? Was there anything to be gained from such a meeting? Or would it simply reopen wounds that had finally begun to heal? I need to think about that, I answered truthfully. This has been unexpected. I understand. The offer stands whenever, if ever, you're ready. Good night, Emily. Good night, Nathan. I set my phone aside and returned my gaze to the city skyline, where office buildings stood illuminated against the night sky. Somewhere among them was the Heritage Trust headquarters, where my new office was being prepared. Somewhere else was the Meridian Technologies building, where Nathan was attempting to rebuild his career from the ground up. Our paths had diverged, dramatically, yet remained strangely connected through the experiences we had shared. I wasn't sure if I would ever take him up on his offer of coffee. Some chapters are better left closed, their lessons absorbed but not revisited. Yet I couldn't deny a certain curiosity about the man Nathan might be becoming in the aftermath of failure. A transformative experience I knew intimately. The following Monday, I arrived at Heritage Trust earlier than usual, energized by the finalization of my promotion. The executive offices were still mostly empty as I made my way to William's corner suite for our scheduled meeting. His assistant smiled as I approached. He's expecting you, Ms. Parker. Go right in. William stood as I entered, coming around his desk to shake my hand. Congratulations, Emily. The board couldn't be more pleased with your acceptance. Thank you for your support, William. I know this kind of rapid advancement is unusual. He gestured for me to take a seat. Merit should be recognized regardless of tenure. Your programs have brought in millions in new business and positioned Heritage as an innovator in community banking. The promotion is well-deserved. For the next hour, we discussed transition plans and my vision for the innovation department. William had already identified several promising candidates to take over my current role, allowing me to focus on broader strategic initiatives while maintaining oversight of the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund. As our meeting concluded, William's expression turned more personal. I hope you don't mind my asking, but Rachel mentioned you had some communication with Nathan recently. I raised an eyebrow, surprised that Rachel had shared this information. News travels fast. It was just a brief text exchange. Small city, William replied with a slight shrug. Banking and legal circles overlap considerably. Are you reconciling? The question took me aback. No, nothing like that. He congratulated me on the promotion. Apparently he's working at Meridian Technologies now. William nodded. As a project manager, I heard through industry channels, several banks rejected his applications due to the finance flow situation. I felt a twinge of something complex, not quite sympathy, but recognition of how dramatically fortunes could change. He asked to meet for coffee. I haven't decided if I will. That's entirely your personal business, William said quickly. I only mention it because Meridian is bidding on our new mobile banking platform. There's a possibility your paths could cross professionally. The coincidence seemed almost too perfect. Nathan working for a company seeking business from the bank, where I now held significant influence. Is he personally involved in the Meridian bid? Not as far as I know, but it's a relatively small team. Just something to be aware of as you transition to your new role. I appreciated William's transparency. I'll recuse myself from any decisions involving Meridian if necessary. I trust your judgment completely, Emily. William stood, indicating our meeting was concluding. The executive announcement goes out company-wide this afternoon. Prepare for an influx of congratulatory messages. As I walked back to my current office, soon to be traded for a larger suite on the executive floor, I contemplated this new potential complication. The possibility of professional interaction with Nathan added another layer to consider regarding his invitation for coffee. Perhaps it would be better to establish clear boundaries now, rather than risk awkwardness in a potential business setting. Before I could overthink the situation, I pulled out my phone and typed a quick message. I've considered your invitation. Coffee might be appropriate, given we may have some professional overlap in the future. Thursday, 8 a.m., Riverside Cafe? His response came within minutes. Thursday works, thank you, Emily, I'll see you then. I put away my phone, suddenly questioning my decision. Was I opening a door better left closed? Or was this an opportunity to properly close a chapter that had ended messily, allowing both of us to move forward without lingering complications? Either way, I had 3 days to prepare myself for a conversation I never expected to have. Coffee? With the man whose dreams I had sacrificed everything for, and who had discarded me when I no longer served his narrative. Thursday would determine whether that past could be properly laid to rest, or if some wounds were simply too deep for civil closure. Thursday arrived with unexpected anxiety. I woke earlier than necessary, spending extra time selecting my outfit, tailored navy suit that projected confidence without appearing ostentatious. The pearl earrings completed the ensemble, a subtle reminder of how far I had come. Riverside Cafe was a deliberate choice, neutral territory far from both Heritage Trust and Meridian Technologies. Neither too casual nor too formal, it offered privacy without intimacy. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table with a clear view of both the entrance and the river beyond the cafe's glass wall. At precisely 8 a.m., Nathan walked through the door. The changes in him were immediately apparent. Gone was the designer suit and carefully styled hair that had become his uniform during Finance Flow's ascent. Instead, he wore a modest button-down, shirt and slacks, his hair shorter and less styled than I remembered. Even his posture had changed, the confident swagger replaced by something more measured, more contained. His eyes found mine across the room, and for a brief moment, I glimpsed uncertainty in his expression before he composed himself and approached my table. "Emily," he greeted, extending his hand formally. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." I shook his hand briefly, noting the absence of the expensive watch he once considered essential to his executive image. "You're exactly on time. Some things haven't changed." A small smile flickered across his face as he took the seat across from me. Punctuality remains one of my few consistent virtues. The waitress appeared, saving us from immediate conversation. We both ordered coffee, black for him, latte for me, exactly as we had during our marriage. Once she departed, an awkward silence settled between us. "Congratulations on your promotion," Nathan said finally. "Chief Innovation Officer is impressive by any standard, but especially given the timeline." "Thank you," I replied, studying him carefully. "William mentioned Meridian is bidding on Heritage's mobile banking platform. Are you involved with that project?" He shook his head. "Different department. I'm in Enterprise Solutions, focused on inventory management systems." A hint of irony colored his voice. Apparently, my experience with Finance Flow made me uniquely qualified for that particular niche. Our coffees arrived, providing another welcome interruption. As the waitress departed, Nathan took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Emily, I want to apologize," he began, his eyes meeting mine directly. "What I did, how I treated you, the things I said, the way I erased your contributions, it was unforgivable. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just need you to know that I recognize the harm I caused and I deeply regret it." The words hung between us, unexpectedly raw and direct. I had anticipated excuses, perhaps subtle attempts to reframe our shared history in more favorable terms. His straightforward acknowledgement caught me off guard. "Why now?" I asked, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug. "It's been over a year since the divorce." Nathan considered the question. "Honest answer? Failure is clarifying. When everything fell apart, the company, my reputation, my financial security, I was forced to confront who I really was and how I'd behaved. The narrative I'd constructed about myself, about us, couldn't withstand reality. And what reality was that? That I didn't build Finance Flow alone. That without your financial support and sacrifice, there would have been no company for me to lose." He paused, running a hand through his shorter hair. "That the person I became, the person who could dismiss years of partnership and support as minor contributions, wasn't someone I was proud to be." I sipped my coffee, absorbing his words. "You hurt me, Nathan. Not just by cheating with Vanessa, but by systematically erasing me from a story we built together. That was the deeper betrayal." "I know," he said quietly. "When success came, I rewrote the narrative to cast myself as the solitary genius. It was easier than acknowledging how dependent I'd been on you. Financially, emotionally, practically. My ego couldn't tolerate that reality. And your mother was happy to support that version of events?" Nathan winced. "Diane has her own issues. With reality, she's struggling to adjust to my new circumstances." "You mean she's struggling to accept that her brilliant son isn't a CEO anymore?" He acknowledged this with a slight nod. "She recently suggested I launch another startup. I had to explain that no investor in the industry would touch me after the Finance Flow debacle." There was something satisfying about hearing this, not from a place of vengeance, but as confirmation that actions had consequences, even for those who had once seemed immune to them. "How is Meridian treating you?" I asked, steering toward safer territory. "It's an adjustment," he admitted. "Taking direction instead of giving it, working within established structures rather than creating my own. But there's a certain freedom in it too. When things go wrong, it's not entirely on my shoulders anymore." I could relate to that sentiment, though from a very different perspective. For years, the weight of our financial survival had rested solely on me, while Nathan pursued his vision unencumbered by practical concerns. "And you?" he asked. "Beyond the impressive title, how are you finding Heritage Trust?" "It's where I should have been all along," I replied honestly. "The work challenges me intellectually while allowing me to create genuine opportunities for others. My Women's Entrepreneurship Fund has the highest success rate in the bank's portfolio." Nathan's expression softened. "You always did have better financial instincts than I did. You were wasted on bookkeeping for Finance Flow." The acknowledgement, so casually delivered now, contrasted sharply with his previous dismissals of my capabilities. "Yes," I agreed simply. "I was." Another silence fell between us, but less awkward than before. The initial tension had eased, replaced by a strange sense of two people taking stock of a shared past from the relative safety of their divergent presence. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," Nathan said finally. "Why did you create that agreement in Cancun? You must have had concerns about our relationship even then, just 6 months in." The question surprised me. It wasn't one I had anticipated. It wasn't about trust, if that's what you're thinking. It was about visibility, about ensuring that my contributions wouldn't be forgotten or minimized when the story of Finance Flow was eventually told. "Prescient of you," he observed. "Not really." You were already showing signs of rewriting our narrative even then. The way you describe our early days to investors, emphasizing your vision and downplaying my financial support. Small things, but telling. Nathan absorbed this with a thoughtfulness that would have been alien to the man I had divorced. I want to ask you something else, but I'm not sure I have the right. Ask, I said, curious despite myself. Worst case, I don't answer. Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't? He hesitated, searching for words. If you hadn't cheated with Vanessa? If you hadn't transferred our savings? If you hadn't tried to erase me from the company's history? I supplied the possibilities without rancor. All of it, he acknowledged. If I had behaved like a decent human being and actual partner. I considered the question seriously, looking past him to the river flowing steadily outside the cafe. Windows. Sometimes, I admitted. Not in a regretful way, but more as an intellectual exercise. Would I have eventually found my way to Heritage Trust? Would I have discovered my passion for helping women entrepreneurs secure funding? Would I have reclaimed my voice? And your conclusions? He asked. That some relationships serve their purpose and then end, often painfully. That sometimes we need to lose something familiar before we can discover something better. I returned my gaze to him. That doesn't excuse what you did, but I've come to recognize that our ending, however ugly, was necessary for both of us to find our proper paths. Nathan nodded slowly. I'd like to think I would have found my way to some of these realizations without losing everything, but he trailed off with a self-deprecating shrug. But some lessons require spectacular failure. I finished for him, exactly. We had both finished our coffees, the natural endpoint of our meeting approaching. Part of me was surprised by how civil, even meaningful, the conversation had been. Another part remained wary, remembering how charming Nathan could be when it served his purposes. I should get going, I said, gathering my bag. I have a committee meeting at 9:30. Nathan nodded, signaling the waitress for the check. Thank you for meeting with me, Emily. I know you had every reason to refuse. Why did you ask? I countered. What were you hoping to achieve? He considered the question as he paid the bill, waving away my offered card. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Some vague notion of closure, perhaps. Or maybe just the chance to acknowledge, face to face, how wrong I was. How much damage I caused. And has it helped? I asked, genuinely curious. I'm not sure helped is the right word. It feels necessary, though. A step I needed to take, regardless of the outcome. We walked together to the cafe exit, maintaining a careful distance that acknowledged our history without suggesting any lingering intimacy. Emily, Nathan said as we reached the sidewalk, I have a professional request, if you're open to it. I raised an eyebrow, instantly wary. What kind of request? Nothing that benefits me directly, he clarified quickly. There's a developer, at Meridian, Jamie Chen. Brilliant programmer, developed a financial literacy app for underserved communities. She's been trying to secure funding to launch it independently, but keeps hitting walls with traditional banks. And you're suggesting I consider her for the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund? I asked, surprised by the direction of the conversation. Nathan nodded. She doesn't know about our history. I'd prefer to keep it that way for professional reasons. But her concept is solid, addressing a genuine need. It reminded me of your focus on financial empowerment. I studied him, looking for ulterior motives but finding only what appeared to be sincere advocacy. Have her submit an application through the proper channels. I can't promise special consideration, but I'll make sure it receives a fair review. That's all I'm asking. Thank you. He hesitated, as if debating whether to extend his hand for a farewell shake, but ultimately nodded instead. Take care, Emily. You too, Nathan. As I walked toward my car, I was struck by the surreal nature of the encounter. For so long, Nathan had loomed in my mind as the villain of my story, the man who had taken my sacrifice and support, then discarded me when I no longer served his purposes. The person I had just coffee with was different, humbled by failure, apparently genuinely regretful of his actions. Whether this transformation was permanent or merely a product of diminished circumstances remained to be seen. But I found, somewhat to my surprise, that I didn't need to know. Our paths had diverged, our lives separated. This brief intersection had provided a kind of closure I hadn't realized I needed. By the time I reached Heritage Trust, I had mentally transitioned fully to the day ahead: committee meetings, loan reviews, mentoring sessions with promising entrepreneurs. The coffee with Nathan already felt like a curious interlude, significant but contained. Gabriella greeted me as I entered my office. "Good morning, Ms. Parker. The executive announcement went out company-wide 30 minutes ago. Your inbox is already filling with congratulations." "Thank you, Gabriella. Could you prioritize any messages from the board or current clients? I'll address the congratulatory emails later." I set down my bag and glanced at my calendar. "Is everything prepared for the committee meeting?" "Yes. All materials have been distributed, and the conference room is ready. Also, a Ms. Chen called while you were out. She mentioned Mr. Harrison referred her regarding the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund. I've scheduled her for an initial consultation next Tuesday." I paused, momentarily taken aback by the speed with which Nathan's suggestion had materialized. "Did she mention who she works for?" "Meridian Technologies. She's a senior developer there." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Thank you, Gabriella. I'll review her information before the meeting." The morning proceeded with its usual efficient rhythm, the routine of meetings and decisions a welcome return to normalcy after the emotional complexity of the coffee with Nathan. By lunchtime, I had nearly forgotten the encounter, my focus entirely on the responsibilities of my current and imminent roles. William stopped by my office around 1 o'clock, closing the door behind him, a signal that the conversation would be personal rather than strictly professional. "How did your meeting go this morning?" he asked, taking a seat across from my desk. "Coffee with Nathan?" I clarified, though I knew that's what he meant. "Surprisingly civil. He apologized for his behavior during our marriage and the divorce, seemed genuinely remorseful." William studied me carefully. "And you're all right?" I appreciated his concern, but found myself smiling reassuringly. "More than all right, actually. There's something liberating about having that conversation, about seeing him as just a person, flawed, humbled, human, rather than the looming figure he'd become in my mind." "Closure," William observed. "Something like that," I agreed. Though I was surprised when a developer from Meridian called about the entrepreneurship fund this morning. Apparently Nathan suggested she apply. William raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned?" "Not at all. From what Gabriella gathered, she seems legitimately qualified. I'll evaluate her application like any other." I paused, considering. "Though I'll recuse myself if there's even a hint of impropriety." "I trust your judgment completely," William assured me. "You've more than proven your integrity." After he left, I turned to my computer, opening the preliminary information Gabriella had gathered on Jamie Chen. Her credentials were indeed impressive. Master's degree in computer science, 5 years at Meridian focusing on financial technology, volunteer work teaching coding to girls from low-income communities. Her financial literacy application had already won a Regional Innovation Award, though it remained underfunded. On paper, she appeared to be exactly the kind of candidate our fund was designed to support. Whether Nathan had directed her our way, out of genuine belief in her project, or as some attempt to maintain a connection to me remained unclear. Ultimately, it didn't matter. Jamie Chen's application would be evaluated on its own merits, regardless of how it had come to my attention. The rest of the day passed quickly, filled with preparations for my transition to the executive suite. By evening, I was mentally exhausted but satisfied with the progress made. As I packed up to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Heard through the grapevine you had coffee with Nathan this morning. Drinks tonight to debrief? Concern level. Hi." I smiled at her protective instinct, typing a quick reply. "All good. Actually, quite healing. Rain check on drinks? Executive. Meetings all day tomorrow. Need to prepare tonight." Her response came immediately. "Fine, but full details required eventually. Congrats again on the big promotion." Driving home, I found my thoughts returning to the morning's conversation with Nathan. There had been a moment, brief but distinct, when I'd glimpsed the person I had originally fallen in love with, passionate, intelligent, capable of genuine connection. That person had been overshadowed by ambition, ego, and ultimately corruption, but perhaps had never completely disappeared. The thought wasn't accompanied by regret or longing, simply a quiet acknowledgement that people are complex, neither wholly villains nor entirely heroes in the stories of our lives. My own narrative had evolved from supportive wife to invisible, contributor to empowered executive. Nathan's had transformed from visionary entrepreneur to corrupt CEO to humbled employee. Both journeys contained elements of truth and fiction, strength and weakness, growth and regression. When I arrived home, a package awaited on my doorstep, a small box with no return address. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a USB drive and a handwritten note. "Thought you might want these. Old finance flow photos, including many with you at early client meetings and development sessions. Your contributions shouldn't be erased from the record. NW." I stood in my entryway, turning the drive over in my hands, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. It wasn't dramatic or grandiose, just a simple acknowledgement of the truth, a small effort to restore what had been deliberately removed. Whether motivated by genuine remorse or lingering guilt, it represented a kind of amends that felt more meaningful than our entire coffee conversation. Later that evening, after reviewing materials for the next day's meetings, I connected the drive to my laptop. It contained dozens of photos from Finance Flow's earliest days. Nathan and me working side by side at our kitchen table, celebrating our first paying client with cheap champagne, presenting at a small business conference, where I had taken vacation days from all 3 jobs to attend. Visual evidence of our partnership, of my presence in the company's foundation. The images brought an unexpected lump to my throat, not from nostalgia or regret, but from the simple power of being seen, of having my contributions acknowledged after being systematically erased. Nathan couldn't change what he had done, couldn't undo the betrayal or the hurt, but this small act of restoration mattered in ways I hadn't anticipated. I selected several photos that particularly captured my involvement and sent them to my printer. Tomorrow, they would join the professional certificates and awards in my new executive office, not as remembrances of my marriage, but as documentation of my business acumen and entrepreneurial experience. My history with Finance Flow was part of my professional journey, regardless of how painfully that chapter had ended. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a final text for the day. Found the photos useful? Or should I have left the past? Undisturbed? Nah. I considered ignoring the message, maintaining the boundary of our morning coffee as a one-time interaction rather than the beginning of renewed communication. But the gesture with the photos deserved acknowledgement. "Thank you for the photos," I replied. "They're an important part of my professional history. I appreciate the restoration." His response came quickly. "It's the least I could do, literally the very least. Good luck tomorrow. You'll be extraordinary as always." I didn't reply further, setting my phone aside and turning out the light. Tomorrow would mark the official beginning of my executive role, a position I had earned through resilience, determination, and the painful wisdom gained from learning to value myself when others did not. The journey had been far from what I had envisioned when I first met Nathan, at that dinner party years ago, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. The following morning, I arrived at Heritage Trust earlier than usual, wanting time to settle into my new office before the day's meetings began. The executive suite occupied the top floor of the building, offering sweeping views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. My new office was positioned at the corner, with sightlines to both the river and the downtown business district where I had once worked multiple jobs to support Nathan's dream. Gabriella had already arranged for my personal items to be moved from my previous office. My degrees and certificates hung perfectly aligned on one wall. A small table near the window displayed the family photos and awards I had accumulated since joining Heritage Trust. A gap remained on the credenza behind my desk, the perfect spot for the finance flow photos I had printed the night before. As I arranged them carefully in a stylish frame William had given me as a promotion gift, there was a knock at my open door. I turned to find William himself, carrying a small gift bag. "Traditional first-day gift for new executives," he explained, setting the bag on my desk. "Though you've more than earned your place here already." Inside was a beautiful fountain pen, inscribed with my initials and the Heritage Trust logo. "It's lovely, William. Thank you." He noticed the photos I had been arranging. "Finance flow? Days?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. I nodded. "Part of my professional journey, regardless of how that chapter ended. My contributions to building that company inform how I approach entrepreneurial funding now. I thought it was important to acknowledge that history rather than pretend it never happened." William studied the photos thoughtfully. "Integration, rather than compartmentalization. Wise approach." He gestured to the spectacular view from my windows. "How does it feel? All of this?" I took a moment to consider, looking out at the city where my life had transformed so dramatically in such a relatively short time. Surreal sometimes, but also strangely right, as if this is where I was always meant to end up, even if the path here was unexpectedly circuitous. "The best journeys often are," William observed. "The direct path rarely teaches us what we need to know for the destination." We were interrupted by Gabriella, announcing the arrival of the executive team for our morning briefing. As William departed to greet them, I placed the framed finance flow photos on the credenza, positioning them between my business degree and my Heritage Trust recognition awards, past, present, and future, aligned in proper perspective. The day unfolded in a whirlwind of meetings, introductions, and strategic discussions. My fellow executives welcomed me warmly, several expressing particular interest in expanding the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund to other branches of the bank. By afternoon, I felt fully integrated into my new role, the initial nervousness replaced by confident engagement with the challenges and opportunities ahead. As I was reviewing applicant files late in the day, Gabriella knocked gently. "Ms. Parker, there's a delivery for you." She entered carrying a modest arrangement of lilies, almost identical to the ones I had received when I first joined Heritage Trust. The card bore a simple message: "Congratulations on your extraordinary journey. The bank owner isn't the only one left speechless by your rise." N. The reference to my journey from erased wife to banking executive brought an unexpected smile to my face. There was something satisfying about this acknowledgement from the, person who had once dismissed my contributions so completely. "Would you like me to find a place for these?" Gabriella asked. I considered the flowers, what they represented, and whether I wanted that reminder in my new executive space. "No," I decided. "These are better appreciated elsewhere. Could you have them sent to the women's shelter downtown?" With an anonymous note that sometimes new beginnings come from unexpected endings. "Of course," Gabriella replied, taking the arrangement with her as she left. I turned back to my window, watching as late afternoon sunlight gilded the cityscape before me. So much had changed since that fateful day when Nathan had transferred our savings to Vanessa, setting in motion a chain of events that had ultimately led me here, to this office, to this life I had created from the ashes of betrayal. The bank owner's call that had left Nathan speechless, William Harrison reaching out to offer me a position after witnessing Nathan's financial manipulations, had been the first step on this unexpected journey. A journey that had transformed me from supporting character in someone else's story to the protagonist of my own. My phone lit up with a calendar notification. Jamie Chen, Women's Entrepreneurship Fund Application Review, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Whether Nathan's referral was genuine professional respect or an attempt at amends didn't matter. What mattered was that another woman with a vision would receive the support and recognition I had once been denied. This was my legacy now, not as Nathan Wilson's ex-wife, but as Emily Parker, financial executive and champion for women entrepreneurs. The narrative had been reclaimed, rewritten not through denial of painful chapters, but through the integration of lessons learned and strength gained. As evening shadows lengthened across my new office, I gathered my materials for the next day's meetings, satisfied with this first day in my executive role. The journey had not been what I expected when I graduated with my business degree years ago, but it had delivered me exactly where I needed to be, equipped with hard-won wisdom that textbooks could never provide. 6 months into my role as Chief Innovation Officer, Heritage Trust had transformed its approach to entrepreneurial funding. My Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative had expanded to all 12 regional branches, resulting in a 40% increase in approved loans to female business owners. The financial press had taken notice, with the Wall Street Journal featuring our program in a special report on banking innovation. Jamie Chen's financial literacy application had not only received funding but had become our flagship success story. The app, designed to help underserved communities access basic financial education, had gained over 50,000 users in its first quarter. We'd partnered with 5 school districts to implement a youth version of the program, teaching teenagers essential money management skills before they entered adulthood. My new executive office had become a hub of activity, hosting weekly meetings with promising entrepreneurs and quarterly gatherings of our Women's Advisory Committee. The boardroom adjacent to my office was often filled with diverse voices discussing funding strategies, market opportunities, and innovative approaches to traditional banking challenges. It was during one such meeting that Gabriella interrupted with an urgent message. "Ms. Parker, I apologize for the interruption, but Mr. Harrison needs to see you immediately." I excused myself from the advisory committee, promising to return shortly. William's assistant waved me directly into his office, where I found him reviewing documents with an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit. "Emily, thank you for coming so quickly," William greeted, rising from his desk. "This is Lawrence Becker from the Federal Regulatory Commission. He's here about Meridian Technologies." My stomach tightened involuntarily at the mention of Nathan's employer. "What about Meridian?" Lawrence Becker stepped forward, extending his hand. "Ms. Parker, I understand you were previously married to Nathan Wilson, formerly of Finance Flow Technologies, now employed at Meridian?" "That's correct," I confirmed, immediately wary. "Our divorce was finalized nearly 2 years ago. I've had minimal contact with him since," William interjected smoothly. "Mr. Becker has uncovered some concerning information regarding Meridian's bid for our mobile banking platform." "I'm not involved with that project," I clarified. "I deliberately recused myself due to my history with Mr. Wilson." "That's precisely why we need your help," Becker explained. "We've discovered evidence suggesting someone accessed confidential Heritage Trust documents through backdoor methods. Documents specifically related to your Women's Entrepreneurship Fund." The revelation hit like a physical blow. "That's impossible. Nathan has no access to Heritage systems." "Not directly," Becker agreed. "But it appears someone utilized Jamie Chen's application to obtain certain proprietary information about Heritage's funding criteria and internal assessment models." I sank into the nearest chair, mind racing. Jamie's application was legitimate. Her qualifications are impeccable. The financial literacy app is already proving successful. The application itself isn't in question, William assured me, but we need to determine how this information breach occurred and who's responsible. After discussing the details further, I returned to my advisory committee meeting, maintaining a composed exterior while my thoughts churned with questions and doubts. Had I been naive? Had I unwittingly provided someone an opportunity to manipulate Heritage Trust through my programs? Later that evening, alone in my office after most employees had departed, I allowed myself to fully process the situation. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Nathan. "Need to talk urgently, not what it appears. Please." I stared at the message, anger and betrayal washing over me in waves. I pressed the power button, silencing the phone without replying. A soft knock at my door drew my attention. Jamie Chen stood hesitantly at the threshold, her expression troubled. "Ms. Parker? Your assistant said you might still be here. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Jamie," I acknowledged, gesturing for her to enter. "What can I do for you?" She took a seat across from my desk, hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I've just been questioned by federal investigators about my application to the Entrepreneurship Fund. They suggested there might be irregularities in how I obtained certain information." I studied her carefully, looking for signs of complicity. "What did you tell them?" "The truth," she replied immediately. "That Nathan Wilson suggested I apply after seeing my presentation at Meridian's Innovation Showcase. That he offered to review my proposal before submission, which I declined because it seemed inappropriate given his position." Her eyes met. Mine directly. They asked about my relationship with Mr. Wilson, which is purely professional. Then they showed me sections of my proposal that apparently contain information matching Heritage's proprietary assessment models. "Information you couldn't have had access to," I observed. Jamie nodded, distress evident in her expression. "Exactly. But I didn't, Ms. Parker. I developed those projections based on publicly available financial data and my own algorithm. If there are similarities to Heritage's models, they're coincidental or perhaps reflect industry standards." Something in her earnest explanation rang true. "The investigators believe someone may have manipulated your application to gain access to Heritage systems." "That doesn't make sense," Jamie countered. "Mr. Wilson never saw my final proposal. In fact, he seemed surprised when I mentioned I'd submitted it directly to Heritage rather than through him as he'd offered. This detail caught my attention. He wanted to submit it himself? He suggested it would have a better chance if he facilitated the process. When I declined, he seemed briefly annoyed but then wished me luck. Her passionate defense of the project rather than herself spoke volumes. "The program isn't in jeopardy, Jamie. The investigation is focused on potential corporate espionage regarding Heritage's mobile banking platform." After Jamie departed, I found myself staring at my silent phone. Against my better judgment, I powered it on to find additional messages from Nathan, including one mentioning his mother Diane and suggesting I check my Heritage email. With growing apprehension, I logged in to find a message with an attached audio file. The recording revealed Diane Wilson's voice speaking to a Meridian executive, discussing unauthorized access to Heritage's entrepreneurship models through Jamie's application, without Nathan's knowledge. Diane was trying to manipulate the situation to secure the Heritage contract and restore her financial standing after losses from Finance Flow's collapse. I arranged to meet Nathan in the Heritage Trust lobby, public, secure, and monitored. He arrived with comprehensive evidence showing Diane had been accessing his Meridian credentials without authorization, effectively impersonating him while gathering information about Heritage's systems. "Why would she risk this?" I asked, genuinely perplexed. "The potential legal consequences are severe." Nathan's expression hardened. "The Finance Flow collapse destroyed more than my reputation. Diane had invested heavily in the company, mortgaging her house, liquidating her retirement accounts. When everything fell apart, she lost everything. This scheme was her attempt to recoup those losses. At Your expense, I observed. She was willing to let you take the fall for corporate espionage. It wouldn't be the first time she's prioritized financial security over ethical considerations, he replied. I've already reported everything to Meridian's compliance officer and the federal investigators. I'm here because I needed you to know I wasn't behind this. The sincerity in his expression seemed genuine, but I had been fooled before. Have you spoken with your mother about this? Not yet. The investigators advised against it until they've secured all evidence. He closed his laptop, his posture deflating slightly. I wanted to believe she'd accepted our changed circumstances, that she was supporting my efforts to rebuild ethically. Instead, she was working behind the scenes to restore what was lost, regardless of the methods or consequences. There was something poignant in watching Nathan confront his mother's betrayal, a parallel to my own journey of recognizing his betrayal years earlier. The cycle of deception and disappointment continuing, but with roles reversed. What happens? Now? I asked. Legally? The investigation continues with a new focus. Personally? He shrugged, the gesture conveying both resignation and liberation. I sever whatever remaining financial ties exist between us, set proper boundaries that should have been established years ago. I nodded, understanding the painful necessity of such decisions. And professionally? My position at Meridian is likely compromised, regardless of my innocence. The appearance of impropriety is often enough in corporate settings. His smile was rueful. Back to square one, it seems. Not entirely, I countered. You've gained perspective that will serve you wherever you go next. Hard-won wisdom about recognizing manipulation, about ethical boundaries. Lessons you tried to teach me years ago, he acknowledged. I wasn't ready to hear them then. After he departed, I immediately informed William, arranging an emergency meeting with the federal investigators to share this new information. The following days were a whirlwind of statements, evidence reviews, and strategic discussions about protecting Heritage's systems and reputation. Diane Wilson was ultimately charged with multiple counts of corporate espionage, wire fraud, and identity theft. Nathan provided key testimony against his mother, a painful but necessary step toward accountability. Meridian Technologies withdrew their bid for Heritage's mobile banking platform, their reputation tarnished despite official statements distancing the company from Diane's actions. 6 weeks later, I received a hand-delivered letter at my office. Inside was a simple note from Nathan. Moving to Seattle next month. Fresh start, new perspective. Wanted you to hear it from me rather than through banking circles. Thank you for believing me when it mattered most. You've built an extraordinary life from the ashes of what I destroyed. I'm finally trying to do the same, just on a different coast. Wishing you continued success and happiness. Dar. There was no request for response, no suggestion of future communication, just a courteous notification of his departure and acknowledgement of my journey. Clean closure without emotional entanglement. That evening, as I stood in my executive office overlooking the city I had made my own, I reflected on the strange, painful, ultimately transformative path that had brought me here. From supporting someone else's dream to creating opportunities for others to achieve theirs. From financial sacrifice to institutional leadership. From erasure to prominence. William joined me at the window, handing me a glass of champagne from the executive celebration happening down the hall. Congratulations. Again, Emily. The expansion of the Entrepreneurship Fund to our West Coast branches is generating tremendous positive publicity. Thank you, I replied, accepting the glass, though I'm more focused on the impact than the publicity. 37 new businesses funded in this quarter alone, with an 82% success rate. Numbers that speak for themselves, William agreed. The board is discussing potential national expansion through partner banks. Your model could transform how financial institutions approach women entrepreneurs across the country. I received an interesting call today, William mentioned casually. a Seattle-based investment firm specializing in ethical technology ventures. They're establishing an advisory board and asked if I could recommend someone with both financial expertise and first-hand experience with startup dynamics. I glanced at him, immediately suspecting Nathan's influence. Seattle? William's expression revealed nothing. Pure coincidence, I'm sure. I took the liberty of suggesting they contact you directly. Such advisory roles often involve minimal time commitment but maximum impact, shaping investment criteria, mentoring promising entrepreneurs. I'll consider it when they call, I promised, not entirely sure whether I welcomed this potential connection or preferred maintaining complete separation. The past doesn't dictate the future, Emily, William observed, but it can inform it in valuable ways. We rejoined the celebration, where heritage executives mingled with successful entrepreneurs from our funding programs. Jamie Chen was among them, her financial literacy application now expanding to 3 additional states through educational partnerships. As I circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations and discussing future initiatives, I reflected on William's philosophical observation. The past didn't dictate the future, but it had certainly shaped mine, transforming me from someone who enabled another's vision into a woman who created her own path and helped others do the same. The journey from Nathan's financial support to Heritage Trust executive had been neither linear nor painless. It had required confronting betrayal, reclaiming my voice, and rebuilding my self-worth from the ground up. Yet without those struggles, without hitting rock bottom and choosing to fight back, I might never have discovered my true purpose and potential. The bank owner's call that had once left Nathan speechless had ultimately given me a voice that carried far beyond personal vindication. It had become the catalyst for institutional change, for providing opportunities to women whose contributions might otherwise have been minimized or erased. From personal justice to systemic impact, a transformation more meaningful than any courtroom victory. Later that night, my phone chimed with a notification, the Seattle investment firm requesting a preliminary conversation about their advisory board. I added it to my calendar, neither seeking connection to Nathan's new life, nor actively avoiding it. Our paths might occasionally intersect through professional channels, but we were each authoring our own distinct stories now. Tomorrow brought new funding applications to review, new entrepreneurs to mentor, new opportunities to ensure that women's contributions to business success would never again be erased from the narrative. My narrative, hard-won, authentically mine, and still unfolding with possibilities I was only beginning to imagine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.